Love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Hello, and welcome to Dyslexia Devoted, the podcast dedicated to building awareness, understanding, and strategies to help those with dyslexia. I'm your host, Lisa Parnello, dyslexia therapist and founder of Parnello Education Services. Join me as we dive into today's episode of Dyslexia Devoted. Hello, and welcome to episode 126 of Dyslexia Devoted, all about the power of honesty in education. Last week, I had a couple of kids have really rough days, like real rough. And it was one of those moments where I was so grateful that I have the power to be honest and that the parents that I work with appreciate my honesty. And I was able to tell them their kid had a real rough day. One of the kids had one of the worst days I've seen from him in years. And, one kid, she cried because she's not used to me being firm with her because I don't usually have to use my super firm voice. I usually can, give a quiet redirection and we're all good. We're one-on-one. It's not usually that hard to redirect behavior or that kind of thing. And I had to use my teacher voice, which I don't usually do too much because in my office, we can usually get back on track pretty easily. But every once in a while, a kid needs a swift reminder, especially right after a holiday break. They're just, in the play mode and they're so used to just doing whatever they want for the holidays. And they've got this long break without any really strict rules. And I have to remind them, what it's like to be back in learning mode again. And it's normal. It's not a big deal. I don't care. Kids have rough days. Dude, I have rough days. I have a lot of rough days. And that's okay. And it's all about changing your choice and your behavior to turn it all around. It got me thinking last week about how many times I actually got in trouble for my honesty at the school. It was something that it was not always appreciated by school systems when teachers are honest. There is one particular story about a time when a boy bold-faced lied to me. I think it was maybe a second grader or something like that. But he just straight up lied to my face when I saw him do something. And I told him he was not allowed to lie and he had to tell me the truth and say, what really happened and that he wasn't allowed to lie to me. I got in so much trouble from my boss and was told I wasn't allowed to say kids are lying and I could call it an untruth. Oh my God, an untruth? Really? What kind of word is that? It's just fluffing around what the actual word is. You're just calling it by another name. And you're also taking away the power of calling a kid out on their errors. The big thing out of it is remembering that honesty is powerful. There is so much power in honesty, in being real with it. And it's not always a problem if you just don't treat it as a problem. So what I mean by that is sometimes if something's wrong, call it what it is and fix it. It's not really a big deal. One of the kids last week that was having the really rough week, I was really honest with his mom. I was like, dude, today was a mess. And she's like, I'm so sorry. I was like, why are you sorry? You don't have anything sorry about. You didn't do anything wrong. You're an awesome mom. Your kid having a rough day has no implication on you. It is not a reflection of you. Your kid just was a disaster today. That's just what kids do. They have good days, they have bad days, and some days you want to rip your hair out, but that's not necessarily bad parenting. And it is not a reflection on that mom doing anything wrong that morning. It's not her responsibility that her kid made a bad choice. It's his responsibility. And he's got to learn from those choices and make better ones next time. That's really all there is to it. So we want to think about what is the power we have as educators to be honest, or as parents to be honest with the educators. I've had a few parents be like, dude, my kid is going to be rough. I'm warning you now. I'm sorry. I've tried everything. That's just their personality. I'm sorry. Be ready for it. Love them anyway. And that's okay. If we are all on the same page because we're being honest, that solves so many problems in and of itself. I love that I can tell the moms that I work with and the dads too, but mostly I tend to talk to the moms just because of, life and that's how they divvy, jobs in the family. And I love that I can tell them, I was like, today's rough. Next week will be better. No big deal. Here's what happened. Here's how we fixed it. We'll move on and try better next week. None of the moms are ever mad at me for it. They appreciate it. I'm not judging them. I'm not judging their kid. It's just a statement of fact. Today was a rough day. Tomorrow will be better. It's okay. Now, the education system could honestly use a little bit more honesty. That's what I wanted to talk to you about today. It's not just story time. One of them is, one of the biggest myths that families often find is that if their kid doesn't qualify for services, well, I had them tested. The school said there's nothing wrong. Actually, that's not really what they said. They said your child doesn't fall within the limits that qualifies them for services. Oftentimes, families think that if they don't qualify for services, then the school means that they're fine. It's not quite what it means. It really means the school doesn't have to give you anything extra. That doesn't mean they don't have a learning difference. And if only we can be more honest about that fact. Say, you know what, your child is struggling. Yes, they could use some extra help, but unfortunately, they do not qualify for government-provided services to achieve that help. They won't ever tell you that. And that's one of those things that I wish people could be more honest with in the education system. And it's part of why I've actually really loved teaching in private schools. So for those of you who don't know, I started my career in public education where I was definitely never allowed to say I thought a kid should be tested for services, because that means we are required to pay for said services and said testing, which we were a poor district that they didn't want to pay for that. And that was one thing that while I was paid very poorly in the private education system, which many people don't realize, private schools actually pay less than public schools, and you don't always get a retirement fund unless you pay for it for yourself. There is no retirement system plan in the private school system, at least not either of the two that I worked in. But one of the blessings of being in a private school was I could just tell the families, hey, your child is struggling with XYZ. I really think you should have them evaluated for it. And there was so much power in that honesty and being able to say, this child is struggling. I think we should get an evaluation and make a plan for how we can change their instruction. By having all of that important data and somebody evaluating them truthfully and honestly and not basing their decision based on what, services they might have to pay for after. And that gave us a lot of information and it helped me to change my instruction. And that was something that was also really powerful, being able to just change my instruction. That's something that I don't think a lot of parents realize, is that it's really hard to change the instruction for one child in a class of 25 to 30 kids. Even if you want to change the instruction for that one child, there's only so many things a teacher can do in their day. And it is really hard to give every single kid in the class exactly what they need, the exact moment they need, while also handling the chaos that happens in a classroom. And for anybody who's never set foot in a classroom post-COVID, it's a mess. Kids don't know how to hold pencils. Their behavior is atrocious. Kids' attention spans are minimal, and they feel like if they are not being constantly entertained at all times, this is boring and they should never have to do it. And it's really hard to just maintain order in a classroom. It's just so hard. It's really challenging, and we can't just say to the parents, hey, you know what? I can't help your kid. I've got 25 other kids. I'm trying my best. We can't actually say that. Like you could, but it's not going to go over well. So this is where we kind of have to strike a balance. How can we share honesty and be able to be honest about this child's really struggling? They need this, this, and this. I'm having a hard time providing that. Is there any way you could supplement this? It's really hard when we can't be honest and say, hey, I'm sorry, we really can't support this child. Or, hey, we want to support them, but we are limited into how much support we can give. And that part can become really challenging. And one of the other things that I encountered in my private practice that is really challenging is that I do have a few open spots, but they're all in the middle of the school day. Some of the parents are like, great, no big deal, I'll just pull them out early. And then they went to the school and told them they were going to pull their kids out early. Oh boy, that did not go over well. The school will never admit that they cannot provide services to a child and that it's okay for you to take the kid out of school to go get services somewhere else. That's one of those things that the school system is not honest about. And that is really, really hard for parents because even if they are willing to pay out of pocket to get support for themselves, they're often told no. I've had multiple schools give their parents a really rough time about their kid even leaving 10 minutes early to get to my office by 3 o'clock, let alone leaving for an entire hour in the middle of school day and then coming right back. Now, what if we flip the script on that? What if the school systems could say, I'm so glad you found someone to support your child. We can't provide those kind of services like that. I'm glad you found someone who could. Of course, you can leave a few minutes early. Of course, you can miss this one other class so that your child can read for the rest of their lives, and this other class isn't actually that critical for them to survive their life. You really can survive your whole life without second grade science. You really can't survive your whole life if you can't read. Like, maybe you could, but the odds of you getting into trouble and not making the best life decisions, probably pretty high. Or even some accidental mistakes because you couldn't read the directions. All right, since I'm kind of rambling on today, let's recap our episode. We talked about the power of honesty. It all kicked off with talking about being honest about behaviors. Being able to truthfully say, this child had a rough day, but it's all right. It'll be better tomorrow. No, it's not your fault as a parent. It had nothing to do with you that your kid was a mess. It's just kids. Kids have rough days, and we teach them how to learn from them and have better days in the future. We teach them to be good humans eventually, and it'll be fine. It's not a judgment. We also talked about the fact that schools have a hard time with honesty and wanting to be able to say something, but they're not always allowed to. Teachers are often not allowed to say that a child in their class is suspected of having a learning difference because then the school is required to pay for the testing and the support services for that student. And that can be really hard as an educator when you see a child floundering and you're not allowed to do anything extra and you've used up your bag of tricks. Another struggle is the lack of honesty in admitting that a school isn't able to provide services and to let students get it outside. I've had so many private school kids be allowed to leave early or take a break from the school day or Zoom me from school or get to school a little late just to make sure they get the help that they need. And yet public school will not allow that. So even if the parent is willing to pay for it outside of school, the school system will not allow the kid to come late or leave early or leave for a little while in the middle of class most of the time. And that is really hard because even when you have a solution to the problem, sometimes you still don't have a solution because it can be really hard to find placement in specialized programs for kids to get the additional remediation they need. And then lastly, the fact that we could really use a little bit more honesty when schools really can't provide the services that a child needs. I can't even tell you the number of times a school has said, yes, we can absolutely provide that. And if you actually look at what's really happening in the school, it's not actually providing the services they say they can provide. Especially when, we have the era of teacher shortages and things like that, and teachers get asked to go cover for other classes, and therefore the help that the child was supposed to get doesn't really happen because the SPED teacher has to go substitute for another teacher, and all sorts of crazy things happen. And I really wish we could be a little bit more honest with families as educators, and as a parent, I'm sure you would appreciate the honesty of just knowing the truth. And therefore, you can make a plan to make things better. Because when we can't be honest, we can't make a plan to honestly move forward in a successful manner. We got to be able to actively address the problem openly and honestly so we can come up with some real solutions that really make a difference. All right, that's it for today. I shall see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you want to learn even more about dyslexia, check out parnelloeducation.com/courses. See you next time.